we do forget birthdays and we feel really bad. And I think one reason we feel really bad is because as kids, we were told this is very bad. I just
Mm,
haven't found this is such a deal breaker in friendship. And so I feel badly that we all feel such shame. Forgive ourselves because
mm,
these are executive dysfunction traits. They'll get better, but
mm.
we're not going to suddenly become different people.
Welcome to the Focus and Chill podcast, where we discuss unconventional productivity tactics designed for neurospicy people. I interview neurodivergent guests who've figured out secrets for getting a ton of amazing work done without burning out. I'm your host, Jeremy Nagel. I'm an ADHD software developer turned startup founder and PhD candidate. I built FocusBear to help with my own productivity and burnout challenges. Welcome to episode number 141 of the Focus and Chill podcast. I'm thrilled to be joined by Caroline Maguire today. Caroline is an expert in social emotional learning, ADHD coaching, and relationship development. She's the author of the award-winning book, Why Will No One Play With Me? And Friendship Skills for Neurodivergent Adults, and also hosts the ADHD Social Playbook podcast. An educator, coach, and speaker, Caroline developed a comprehensive social emotional learning training methodology that equips parents, clinicians, and educators with practical tools to build self-awareness, emotional regulation, social understanding, and meaningful relationships. Welcome to the show, Caroline.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, great to have you on board. So could we start with your own experience with neurodivergence? When did you realize
Sure.
that you weren't neurotypical yourself?
I always knew I was different. I'll say that. I remember in like third grade thinking that there were things that were really easy for me that other people struggled with, and then things that I struggled with that everyone else seemed to find really easy. And I remember wishing that I could give away the things that I was really talented at. This is so bananas because I wouldn't do this now, and like trade and be like good at the mundane stuff. But at 12, I was actually always a really dedicated student, but I switched schools. I left a more provincial place. I grew up on Cape Cod. It's like very rural. They show it in the movies with the Kennedys and stuff. But when everybody leaves for the summer, it's a very rural place. I moved to Boston. And when I moved to Boston, I switched schools and the school just knew more. And they realized that I was failing math and that it didn't make sense because I was like really dedicated. I would go every day for help and I would always still get a 69. And so they suggested I get some testing. And I went to a very prominent institution in Boston. I got tested and they found that I was dyslexic, that I had a spatial relations learning disability, which just really affects math. I can do most other things. And then that I had ADHD.
Hmm.
But they told my parents since I was a girl that I would outgrow the ADHD and not to do anything about it, but to remediate the learning disabilities. So my parents, who were not affluent people, made tremendous sacrifices to remediate my learning disabilities and get me help, but they didn't do anything about the ADHD because I won't name them because I don't want to be sued, but like one of the most prominent institutions in Boston had told them like, don't worry about it. It's not a thing for girls. So my parents feel really bad, but they shouldn't.
Yeah, amazing the unhelpful narratives that
Yeah.
still persisting today. Yeah, and the point you were making around swapping your strengths for being able to do the mundane things, yeah, I can relate to that. But it's good to hear that that's now not a mindset that you have. That it sounds like you're now more open to leaning into your strengths. What were the things that you were really good at as a 12-year-old that other people struggled with?
I'm really good at drama and acting and like presenting and speaking.
Hmm.
And I can remember anyone's lines. So I would always know everyone's lines on stage. So if you forgot your line, I'd be like, oh, Jeremy, you say this and then you walk over here. And I was just like, not a marketable skill, really would love to be like good at math. And I would like to remember people's names because as much as I can remember lines, I cannot remember anyone's name. And I could actually, by that time, I had had a teacher who did a lot of dyslexia remediation with me, even though she didn't diagnose me with dyslexia till I was 12. So
Hmm.
I had become like an avid reader and I
Hmm.
was reading like way, way, way above my grade level. and especially using audiobooks, which my mom got me into, not knowing about neurodiversity, but just knowing she had a kid who couldn't read as fast as she wanted. And so my mom was also a librarian. So she would read to me for like hours. And
Mm.
so I was like, no one cares if you can read Tale of Two Cities. I would so much rather be a kid who's good at sports and gets picked for teams and doesn't get bullied. So I just always
Mm.
thought no one cares about these things that like my parents are saying, oh, but you're so good at these things. I would
Mm.
rather be like good at sports and stuff and get picked for things. But now
Mm.
as an adult, I feel like all that was for a reason. I understand people at a level that other people don't and can help them make friends. And so I wouldn't trade for the world. But at the time I was like, I would literally trade anything to actually be able to like catch a ball.
Was the hand-eye coordination, was that linked to the spatial relationship learning difficulty?
Yeah, and both my kids have been diagnosed with dysgraphia, and they both have had occupational therapy, and they are just little carbon copies of me. So I think
Mm.
that part of it was, probably that, and then probably some dysgraphia, probably some other things that
Mm.
they didn't know about in the 80s because there was sort of, just stuff that hadn't emerged scientifically that we just didn't
Mm.
know. So, yeah, I think it was related to that. I'm super clumsy, which I know some ADHD people are, but like I am like gifted. Like I never travel without extra clothes because I like trip and spill on myself, like hand to God.
Mm.
So I was just
Mm.
like, I don't want to be a sitcom character who spills on themselves. Like I want to be one of the cool kids who like catches the football at the big game.
Mm.
And now I realize I wouldn't want to be that person. But at the time when you're little, it seems super
Mm.
appealing.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe that's a good segue into your work, because now your work is a lot about social skills. And I guess the motivation for developing social skills is so you can feel accepted. Were those challenges as a young person what led you to develop an interest in this area?
It was more that I understood people because of it. So when I was
Mm.
first an ADHD coach and I was about age 30, 2005 ish, and I was fortunate enough to be working for Ned Hallowell at the Hallowell Center,
Oh, well.
all my clients were struggling with friendship, no matter what age they were. So I was seeing a wide swath of people. I'm known for kids and teens and young adults, but I was seeing adults and I've always seen adults. It's just not really what I'm known for.
Mm.
And I just was like, hey, I didn't have friends as a kid either. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Like, and I just started noticing a theme. And it was like the clinicians would say, yeah, friendship with ADHD is a big thing. Ned was very supportive. He was like, it's a thing, it's like a real struggle for us. But at the time, no one was talking about it and no one was doing anything about it. And
Mm.
there's a very ADHD trait that I have, which is that it bothers me when people try to pretend everything is okay when it's not
Mm.
okay. And
Mm.
I felt like people weren't talking about it for our community. But when you talked to regular people, so the doctors and the gatekeepers at the organizations and at the conferences were like, oh, people need to get to work, Caroline. This isn't important. And those
Mm.
people have since gone. But
Mm.
the average kid and the adults that I would talk to were like, I want to learn how to make friends. I hate that I can't make friends. So
Mm.
that was really the impetus where I went and I got my master's degree and I like invested in all this education and then developed my own methods because I was like, it's so important. And I missed it so much as a kid too. And I eventually learned how to make friends, but I still had a lot of awkwardness and a lot of challenges. And so I just felt like it's so important. Why aren't we talking about this?
Mm. Is there any aspect of it being the combination sometimes of autism and ADHD, which is quite common, or do you think it's distinct even for people who are pure ADHD?
No, I think it's a lot about the combination. And that was
Mm.
the other thing. Very early in my career, like 2005, I started
Mm.
going to autism conferences and I
Mm.
started getting trained to work with autistic folks. And
Mm.
I started being like, these ADHD people don't just, I'm not trained to diagnose, but these ADHD people don't just have ADHD, they have
Yeah.
autism.
Mm.
And I talked about it a lot. And that was a lot of the people I saw. Like I've always seen those people that they didn't qualify for school services because they had an ADHD diagnosis. But then when I would say to the parents, what about looking at autism too? So it's always been my way. And until 2013, they wouldn't give you that dual diagnosis.
Mm.
And that to me was sad because parents, especially, had to make those choices when they weren't really equipped to make those choices or they weren't given the choice. So I
Mm.
think it's been so important that revolution where we're realizing that crossover.
Yeah. But I imagine there are also challenges for pure ADHDers in terms of interrupting conversations and forgetting to reach out to friends. I think for me personally, it's a combination of social awkwardness, which is probably more the autism side, but also just executive dysfunction and not remembering to reach out to people on their birthdays, and then they feel like I don't care about them. Imagine there's a lot that you would coach people around on both dimensions.
I would, but I would also tell you that there are people who aren't our people who really care about precision, right?
Mm.
So Dr. Ari Tuckman said this to me about a year ago, and I was like, it's so true. We do forget birthdays and we feel really bad. And I think one reason we feel really bad is because as kids, we were told this is very bad.
Mm.
But I think that I definitely agree with you. Like the blurting, the interrupting, the oversharing, not noticing social cues and then making it all about ourselves, like all of that is definitely stuff. But I actually have a thing about the birthday thing because I feel like if you text the next day or you tell someone, like, I so forget, I don't mean to, people will understand. But yet we beat ourselves up so much for that particular trait. And I
Mm.
think it's partly because we were indoctrinated as kids of like, this is such a big deal that you do this. I just
Mm.
haven't found this is such a deal breaker in friendship. And so I feel badly that we all feel such shame. I don't know. Maybe people have given you that feedback, but I feel like it's we decide like this is so horrible, not people are coming up to us saying, I am no longer going to be your friend because you forgot my birthday.
Yeah, I actually kind of like it when people message me the next day or the day after and say belated happy birthday because I know that's what I
Yeah,
do. And it feels like it keeps the birthday celebration going for a bit longer. So
I
maybe
love it
we should be
too.
more tolerant.
And that's what Dr. Ari Tuckman said to me. He said, if someone is so persnickety that they want you to be on time always, and when you're 5 minutes late, they chastise you, maybe they're not your people,
Mm.
right? Maybe they're not meant to be your friend. And I know that it's easier said than done. And there's listeners who are going to say, I don't have anybody. I can't be getting rid of people. I'm not saying get rid of people, but I am also saying turning down the volume on the shame cycle
Mm.
because for every one person who would say that, there's probably 100 who would say, that's just the way so and so is. They're late. And I think there's so much shame, and we have to learn to forgive ourselves because
Mm.
these are executive dysfunction traits. They'll get better, but
Mm.
we're not going to suddenly become different people and always have, and that black and white thinking, always have that better result. Sometimes we're going to blurt and interrupt, even if I work with you, right? Because we have self regulation issues.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. The shame isn't helpful.
No.
In terms of the overall way you structure your time, do you have you got other books that you're working on at the moment, or is it a most of your time is it on coaching, or I'm just curious about how you divide your time.
So I just launched the book a month ago. So Friendship Skills for Neurodivergent Adults just came out a month ago. So I'm
Oh,
pretty
cool.
much in
Congrats.
promotion mode right now.
Hmm.
I do have an idea for another book, but I definitely will for the next year just be promoting it, and maybe I'll start writing things down on stickies or something. I don't know. I don't know if there
Hmm.
will be another book because I've had like two pretty groundbreaking ideas. I would I don't know if I have a third groundbreaking idea, but I spend my time divided between training people to become ADHD coaches, coaching clients myself, and then I also do a lot of work with school systems. So I'll do everything from creating a curriculum for them to help neurodivergent kids make friends or to educating them around neurodiversity and ADHD and autism. And so I do a lot of training as well. And so my time is sort of choppy, which I love because then there's just lots of dopamine.
Yeah, can
Yeah.
relate to
So I don't have like even one gig a day. I have like three different things going on in a given day, usually.
that. Sounds very fun.
It is.
And the work with the school systems would be very powerful because does it also involve helping the neurotypical kids to learn how they might be better friends to neurodivergent people, but potentially also some of the challenges might be universal. I heard a speaker talking about that in the Australian context, that she finds that friendship skills are hard for everyone. And she was talking
Yes.
about different friendship styles and how it's really helpful to know that you don't necessarily have to be someone who's always in a big group, that there are other acceptable ways of having friends too.
Yeah, we're really not nice to introverts in that way. I think the media, I'll blame the media. I think the media makes it seem, and I think those of us who are children of the 80s and 90s, they really made it feel like you had to socialize like an extrovert. And that's something I
Mm,
talk about in friendship skills for neurodivergent adults. I'm like, you have to socialize how you want to socialize and what fills your social cup.
mm,
I wish the school systems allowed me to do more of the work you're talking about. A lot of it more is focused on helping teachers understand or helping parents understand. The best way to safeguard against bullying is peer-to-peer education.
mm,
So one of my personal missions in life is like I'm always trying to convince people to let me do things, right? Like this was
mm,
great, but what could we do this too? And
mm,
sometimes they do, and sometimes they say, no, 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 this was enough. But I feel like as the movement grows and as more people are aware of these things, the more that those opportunities open up, and then I'm ready to slip right in.
mm. Absolutely. I hope that they start letting you. It would be really powerful.
Yes.
So with the rest of your time when you're not writing, promoting, teaching other coaches, coaching, going into school systems, what do you get up to in your spare time? What type of hobbies do you have?
So I'm not as good about hobbies as I would like to be. I'm a mom and I have two neurodivergent kids. So I'm
Mm,
always busy with their stuff,
yeah.
which I enjoy because I want them to have a happy and balanced childhood because I didn't really. But we do boat. We used to sail. But when
Mm.
my kids were little, we realized like sailing, you can't be like, oh, 10 hours from now, we'll be back at the dock when you have like a toddler. So we do boat and we go away almost every weekend in the summer,
Mm,
which in Boston is shorter than I'd like, but we go away almost every weekend on our boat. And I like it because it's actually like screen free going, it's very retro. Like you're going back in
mm.
time. The kids learn work ethic and they learn to, scrub down. We did this weekend. We like scrubbed the top deck together. So I do a lot of that. And I'm just always like an involved mom. That's like the biggest thing. I wanted my kids to have a very full childhood because I'm an only child. I really didn't have that childhood experience where you're doing things together as a family and stuff. So I really wanted that. So that is how I spend sort of my off time.
Mm.
And I really enjoy it.
Yeah, amazing. That sounds so special. And when you were mentioning that you grew up in Cape Cod, I read a book. I think the title is Disconnected. I forget the author, but he goes to Cape Cod on a digital detox. And it sounds like you get that most weekends with going out on the boat.
Yeah. And then that's how it was. I mean, if you've ever seen Jaws, it really is like that in the winter. Like all of the really super, muckety muck people leave and it's fishermen and people. And it's very quiet.
Mm,
So growing up wasn't like the glamorous Kennedys and like the images you see out of Hollywood. It was more like quiet in the winter and stuff. And
mm.
so it is a place writers go. It is a place people go to detox. It's kind of funny. It is a place where like people will tell them, I'll meet someone random and they'll say like, I was late on my third book and like I went to the Cape in the winter and sat in a freezing cold cottage and just like wrote it in the middle of the winter. So
I
detox it
love that.
is.
Nice. How old are your children?
So my son is just turned 12. He's a fifth grader going into sixth. And then my daughter is 17, turning 18 soon, and she's a senior in high school. So she's going to
Hmm.
college next year.
Oh, cool. Very good. I've got a 9-month-old son, and I've definitely lost a lot of my hobbies with being an involved dad. But it sounds like things like going on a boat with your kids, that I imagine it gets better, and being able to share your interests and your hobbies with your children as they get older.
Yeah, and 9 months is so cute. I remember that time. And like, it goes by so fast. I know everyone says that, but I think there's something just really enjoyable. And I really just wanted, I wanted my kids to have that sort of more old fashioned childhood. And
Hmm.
I'm not saying I've completed it 100%, but I definitely wanted them to be out of the competitive environments and like, just feel that strong social emotional growth, right? So I'm not saying I'm perfect at it. They definitely have iPads, they definitely watch them, but it's been good to spend time. And your hobbies do creep away, but you don't mind as much sometimes. My husband has tons of hobbies. He is like
Hmm.
Mr. Hobby. I just never had that many, and then most of them conflicted with life.
Hmm.
So maybe I'll get them back in a few years.
Yeah, it sounds like you're maybe going to be an partial empty nester in a year or two.
I will. I will.
Right. So now going back to work, what do you do to optimize your productivity, especially with writing? Because writing a book, I think, is often a hard mission with ADHD, and I imagine with dyslexia as well, it would add a degree of difficulty. What helped you to write the two books?
So I have a trick. I run on the treadmill and
Ah.
I listen to the music from Rocky 5, the one with the Russian,
Yeah.
and I get all my dopamine up. And then I come and I sit down and I work while I still have that sort of runner's high, dopamine high.
I.
If I'm struggling, like if I'm motivated, like, I want to write this chapter, like I have things to say. And a lot of times, because I'm a mom, I'm like for 3 days thinking about something and I just don't have time to write it. And so by the time I
Mm.
get to my desk, I'm like bursting to write it.
Yeah.
But that's not always the case. And so I do a lot of things to bring me into a sort of hyper focus, but I always have deadlines of like, I have to get my son off the bus or something. So that creates boundaries of like, okay, you only have this amount of time to work.
Mm.
But it also creates anxieties because then you're like, oh, I only have this much time to work. So I always have people who I engage with when I'm writing a book who like I had a really great researcher this time. And then I had a couple other people who helped me behind the scenes, who helped me with the outlining and the like drafts of the chapters and sort of, and friends of mine were great about reading chapters, and I had a great editor in terms of like the organization, because that's the piece I struggle with the most. It's not the writing, it's the like what should go here, what should go there,
Mm.
cut this doesn't need to survive, you can get rid of it piece, which I
Hmm.
think is probably the dyslexia. And so that organizational piece, I definitely always engage people to help me because I feel like otherwise I'm like sitting here in a vacuum and it becomes
Mm.
very hard. And the other good news was that I had thought about friendship skills for neurodivergent adults for like 5 or 6 years. Like
Mm.
I had made some videos with Jessica McCabe at How to ADHD. I had done some writing on it. I'd done some presenting on it. So by the time I went to write even the book proposal, I had a lot of thoughts, right? Like
Mm.
I kind of had in my head like things that needed to be in there. So that also helps because there's a little of that like dopamine chasing involved then, right? Where you're like super jazzed about it and it's sparkly and you've thought about it a lot.
Mm. I love that combination of the runner's high. I do that too. It's a great way to unlock creativity because I'm often thinking about things on the run, and then the
Yes.
constraints of only having a certain amount of time. But then with when you were talking about the anxiety, you then moved into that you've got people to help. Do you find that that helps to dissolve the anxiety to some extent? Being able to have people that you can talk to, and you've got the researcher and the editor and those type of helpers.
Yeah, I think that it does. I mean, I've always been a very anxious person, and I don't know which came first, the chicken or the egg. Like, I don't know if I would have been anxious had I had all the support I needed. Like, I don't know what it was, but it does help because I will say there were a couple of great doctors who I was like, I'm so anxious about these anxiety chapters. And that's literally how I started the anxiety chapters. I was like, I've been anxious about these chapters for months. And they were like, we've got you.
Mhm.
You're gonna run stuff by us. We're gonna read drafts. We're gonna make sure you're not saying anything that's like, not true. And my on my team that I have to do things, one of the women, Melanie Gorman, who does my SEO, she does my newsletter, she does a ton of stuff for me. She helped me with the book, and she is a trained therapist. So
Mm,
she also could be like, I'm not sure you got this right. Right. So that was immensely helpful for the anxiety. But I also feel like the anxiety is like a blessing and a curse. Like it's a monster that will take over,
mm,
but it also keeps me, I don't want to say it keeps me from procrastinating like it's a good thing, but it keeps me from procrastinating because I'm too anxious about procrastinating. Um,
mm.
and then when I shut down, that's when I do turn to coping mechanisms because I can't think straight. So I have to use methods to bring myself back to calm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I guess there's the concept of stress versus eustress, where there's a certain amount of stress that is helpful for moving us into action. And maybe it's the same thing with anxiety, that there's a certain amount of just concern or awareness that there is only a certain amount of time until your son needs to be picked up or until the book proposal is due. And having that front of mind is, I guess, helpful for action. I think I'm often the same as well, that with the challenges around time blindness and forgetting about deadlines, I think I'm often okay with that, mostly because I develop anxiety around it. But
Yeah.
it can be adaptive, is the point I'm trying to make, that a certain amount is okay, but where it becomes paralyzing, I guess that's where it's a problem.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of ADHD people don't have great future thinking, or they are very timeline, et cetera. I think that my future thinking is the opposite. I think that it is on hyper warp speed. Like
Mm,
I am so aware of time passing, and I am so aware of the future and its consequences in a way that is debilitating.
mm,
So I don't procrastinate as much, but I also don't have an off switch. So the
mm,
biggest struggle I've had that I've had to temper is that off switch, and
mm,
saying like the emails will be there tomorrow, the chapter will continue to be written, you do have time, it feels super urgent. I'm a very, very intense person. So
mhm,
it's that's why there's no one size fits all for ADHD, right? Where some
mm,
people are more chill, right? I'm like the opposite, but I have to temper myself and self regulate and create those boundaries, because otherwise I would never stop, because I would just be like, oh my God, time is passing and I have to get this done.
mm.
Um, and so it's part of this whole there's not one size fits all. And that's really where my challenge is the most.
Mm. Yeah, I can relate a lot to that. And I think the problem is that I keep saying yes to things and then that spikes the anxiety because there's always an infinite list of things that I could be doing. But yeah, I'm similar to you, that being able to stop and just trust that tomorrow there'll be more time. Do you have any particular tactics that help you to be able to cut off and to help with knowing that the emails are still going to be there and the chapter will get written tomorrow?
Well, I worked for a long time with an ADHD coach myself and
Mm,
with therapists to change my self-talk around this, and then
mm,
to also learn to set boundaries, because I too
mm,
took on way too much. And now I have a lot going on, but I'm able to say, I just wrote a bunch of emails about this today. Like people were like, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? And I was like, no, like I've taken on as much as I can. And
Mm.
when this is finished, then we can talk.
Hmm.
And I think that was a big development around even having the language to say that to people. I think it wasn't something I naturally came to. I think working with folks to help me was really powerful.
Mm.
And then I will go through phases where I have systems like I'm only taking on, if I have a big project, and then I always have the training at the ADD Coach Academy. So it's like just a constant. I can only take on two more things and that's it. I do try to go through phases where I set up systems like that to say no. When I
Hmm.
was writing the book, I really didn't do, I mean, I love podcasting now because I went through like 2 years where I just like didn't do any
Mm.
because I was like, there's just not enough hours in the day.
Hmm.
So I do try to set up boundaries and systems and try to learn from things, and say, well, during this thing that I'm doing, I've learned I shouldn't have taken on X, Y, and Z. So next time I won't. But it is the biggest thing that I've learned is to pause before saying yes
Hmm.
and to give it like 24 hours sometimes so that I can actually enact those boundaries.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The impulsive part of me doesn't really look at my calendar and think about all the things that I already have. But the following day, the cool executive functioning can kick in a bit more. Is there any productivity advice that you've heard that doesn't work for you?
I think there's advice that I think works for some people. And so
Hmm.
I'm like hip to that.
Mm.
But whenever people give advice that feels like it requires me to not to like just step away too much, that doesn't work. So like I can pause for 24 hours, let the email sit, not
Mm.
respond. That feels okay to me. When people are like just like stop doing things for like a season, that I
Mm.
can't do because I feel like then I get so behind that
Mm.
it's just not worth it. And there are some systems like people who like planners that are paper. I can't do that. I have to have electronic. Like there's definitely things that people get very excited about sometimes that I'm like, I can't do that. Like I have to know my schedule. So I use a lot of methods with my clients, but I kind of try to present them with a buffet of options because I think there's no one size fits all.
Mm.
And what works for me might not work for you.
Yep. Yep. That makes a lot of sense. Do you sometimes end up discussing techniques with clients that definitely don't work for you, but you know that they work for some people?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. There's definitely things that people embrace that I could never do. Like there was this wrist slit thing a few years ago
Oh,
that was
yeah.
going around TikTok where like you would have all your things on a
Mm.
wristband. And
Yeah.
I had clients who really tried that. I
Hmm.
had friends who tried that. I
Mm.
would be like so annoyed at my wrist. And I also everything is hanging on in my brain. I don't need a physical reminder.
Mm.
But that's also depends, right? So I don't need a physical reminder, but I do have clients who need an anchor and who need a visual in front of them and who need to have, signs up that say like pause before whatever. So I think that's part of it is like I may be okay in an area or don't need that help, but then a client of mine might be like, I literally need,
Mm.
a sign in my car that says pause and self-regulate before you drive because I will get behind the wheel and be
Mm.
dysregulated. So like I think
But
yeah, I mean, I think that's why there's no one size fits all. And that's why I'm
mm.
so leery when people are like, oh, do this one thing. And I always tell my clients, like, if you're watching a video or something and someone says, do this one thing, it's garbage because if we could all do this one thing, wouldn't we do it? Like,
Yeah.
I would have done it 25 years ago, right? Like, so
Mm.
I think there is different things that I will present to a client that work for them and don't work for me for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, that makes complete sense. And some things might work for a person at a certain time and then stop working. Yeah, important to
Yes.
experiment. And one thing you mentioned before was about pausing. So I'm gonna put a pause in the podcast right now. We'll take a short break and be back with the audience shortly. The Focus and Chill podcast is brought to you by Focus Bear, a focus enhancement app for ADHDers. Staying on top of tasks is easier than ever with Focus Bear's new To-Dos feature. Record a voice note describing what you need to do, and Focus Bear's AI will turn it into a structured set of subtasks and automatically prioritize it for you. You can also take a photo of the paper to-do list, and the AI will work its magic. I'd love for you to try it. You can jump onto focusbear.io or just Google Focus Bear and try it out. Let me know what you think. Right, we're back from our strategic pause, and what I'd like to ask you about, Caroline, is about your morning and your evening. You were saying that you don't need those wristband things. I also would find them very irritating from a sensory perspective, but you said you remember what to do. What do you start your day with to get yourself into a good headspace?
So I'm an early riser. So I'm a person who gets up at like 5 o'clock in the morning, but I go to bed at senior citizen hour. And I really don't love doing nighttime things past 9 at night because I get up early. It's just my rhythm. But what I do, I had a boss who taught me this. And he didn't know I was neurodivergent, but he just saw potential in me. And he
Mhm.
taught me that every Sunday night I pause and I like write out a to-do list for the week, and it's detailed. And it
Mm.
doesn't mean I'm going to get everything done, but that way I'm less in danger of forgetting things. I
Mhm.
also am the queen of flagging my calendar. So I'm big into being like, don't not just like pay your Chase Manhattan bill, but like, don't forget to write so and so, or tonight you have this podcast, you don't have the Zoom link, whatever. And then I every morning after my son gets off to school, and my daughter's more of a self-cleaning oven because she's older,
Mm.
I sit down with that to-do list, and I often like go through and visualize my day. And sometimes I do it at night. And I do a lot of visualization in terms of what is this going to look like and what are any things I need to take into account. And, it kind of goes back to the ADD thing of like, you want to make a sandwich, but you don't have any bread.
Mhm.
So, one of the things I do to sort of guard against that is that I go over everything and I visualize, and then I look at my calendar and I just look at how these pieces are going to come together. And I usually do that at night or in the morning so that I'm less likely to, that way I can cancel something or I can move something or I can DoorDash the bread, right? So that I'm less likely to have snafu, which cause anxiety. So
Mm.
a bunch of what I do to make all this work is this like pre-planning. And because of my anxiety, I don't have as much trouble getting myself to do that,
Mhm.
because if I don't do it and I'm like halfway through the day, this just happened to me the other day. I was like halfway through the day without a to-do list and I had like stickies all over my desk. My anxiety gets so bad that I like can't function. So
Mm.
it's not that I don't want to make anyone angry who's like, I can't make myself make a to-do list. And they're like, oh, I'm not humble bragging.
Mm.
It's a like a compulsion. I can't function unless I know what's coming.
Mm.
And so that's a lot of how I spend the morning. And then I try to have a start time that I've set, and I literally put it in my calendar. So I'm literally like, go to Starbucks, get iced tea because it's summer here. I get iced tea every day. And then
Mhm.
I'm like, start by 9 a.m. or whatever. I have it in my calendar in different colors. And some days I'm starting at 10 a.m. It depends on the day, but I always put that stuff in
Mhm.
so that I know where I have space and where I don't have space. Like I create a lot of visuals in my calendar.
And it's in the Google Calendar or an electronic calendar that you put the visuals in?
Outlook. I use
Outlook.
Outlook because I don't know why that's what they gave me.
Mm.
So yeah, I use Outlook, and I used to print out my calendar and like have it literally printed in front of me, but I've been able to stop that. But I just find that if I know and can see everything, I mean, everything, I write in everything. Like go to the
Mm.
post office and drop returns or
Mhm.
pay your bill here.
Mhm.
It really helps me feel like I know what's happening. And then if I need to, I move things, right? But
Mhm.
that's a lot of how I spend my morning to get going and to like have a hold on what's coming up and what I need to do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I do something quite similar, though I tend to write it out on paper, but the same process of really thinking things through and thinking about the sequencing and realizing, hang on, I can't be in two places at the same time, or I'm missing the bread.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I don't shame myself for missing the bread, but I'm trying to avoid missing the bread. And part of that is that as a mom, I don't want my kids to be like, there's no food, you know? So I have to think things through. And there's a lot of logistics in my life because of juggling everything. And when I
Mm,
put it on my calendar, I just feel like I'm safeguarding. I externalize everything. I never expect my brain to remember stuff.
yeah, very wise. And then on the other end of the day at senior citizen hour, do you ever struggle getting to sleep, or are you pretty good with sleep?
I exercise pretty regularly. And what I find is that if I exercise regularly, I don't have as much trouble with sleep and sleep stops being an issue. When I do a lot of nighttime things, which sometimes has to happen, right? And I go upstairs later, like 8:30, 8:45, 9
Mm,
o'clock, then I will sometimes have trouble falling asleep. So I
mm,
really try not to have that happen because I feel like I need that wind down time
mhm.
so I can go to bed at senior citizen hour.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm very similar. No, I can't cope after even 8 p.m. I'm not really fit for socializing.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Well, it's been wonderful hearing about your journey and all of your strategies and about the book. If people would like to purchase the book or engage with you, where's the best place for them to find you online?
Friendship Skills for Neurodivergent Adults is available anywhere books are sold.
Mhm.
And they have it in Australia on audiobook, by the way. And then also at author Caroline M is my Instagram and my Facebook. And I do a lot on Instagram. I make a lot of YouTube videos, and that's the handle for that too. So if anyone wants to DM me, if they want to engage with me, I love it. I make real videos on YouTube, like about these topics going deeper.
Mm,
So if people like a topic from the book and they're like, oh, I'd really like to talk about levels of friendship because I get myself into muddles where I, think someone's a friend and they're really an acquaintance, which is a theme in the book. Go to
mm.
YouTube and you can find a lot of videos about that because I go deep into it.
Amazing. Do you have any final words or asks for our audience?
I would love it if you buy the book, and I would love it if just end the shame cycle. We really need to stop beating ourselves up. We're not going to function as typical people. We have to learn to love ourselves as we are, right?
Mm,
And we can externalize things, we can put in place accommodations, but we have to end that shame cycle because it really robs us of some of the joy that we could be experiencing because we do have unique brains and there's benefit to that. I know it doesn't always feel that way, but there is.
yeah, that's really wise advice. We'll wrap the show with that. Thank you so much, Caroline. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Focus and Chill podcast. To listen to other episodes, jump onto podcast.focusbear.io. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or you know someone who'd be a good fit, email us at team@focusbear.io. Otherwise, stay focused, stay chilled, and peace out.